Your accounting firm can replace you overnight. Nobody else can be West Desperado.
Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go. Let's talk about the job hunt real quick. You might be somebody who is in the thick of it right now, or maybe you're someone who's happy where you're at, but you know in the future you're destined for more than the role that you currently have. The first piece of that job hunting journey, where you go from just looking to signing the deal, is your resume. Your resume is the foundation that you're laying. Because let's face it, if your resume sucks, you're probably not going to make it into the interview. And you can't get the job if you don't get the interview. So you want to make sure that your resume is in top condition and the best possible representation of you on paper. And let me tell you, I can't count the number of hours my younger self spent staring at a blank document, wondering what on earth am I going to say on my resume to make me stand out? And chances are you guys have been there too. Resumes are hard. But that's something that Of the West can help with. Our team offers elite career services, and one of those services is resume development or resume refining. With resume development, we create your resume from scratch. We take all of your past experiences and skills and combine those unique details specific to the job that you're applying for to showcase that you are the best candidate. With resume refining, you provide the resume and we tweak it as needed to make sure that it's the best representation of you and your abilities. Either way, you're set up for success from the beginning. That resume is yours to keep forever, although you're probably not going to need it because I bet you get that interview. To learn more about our elite career services, you can visit ofthewest.co/consulting. Welcome to our first guest episode for the month of March. You guys are in for a real treat today. We are sitting down with Shaley Ham, maybe better known to many of you as West Desperado. Shaley is somebody who I have known for years now, and as you'll hear in the interview, I have seen her through every single iteration of her business, West Desperado, and it is really cool to see just how she's flourished and thrived. And I credit it all to her consistency and her business mind. And that is really what we are going to dig into in today's conversation. There is no doubt in my mind that you guys will not love this episode just as much as I do, because she really is just the coolest of the cool girls. So let's get right to it. Today's episode, Shaley Ham. Okay, Shaley, typically I ask people to give a little about themselves. However, I feel like everybody knows you. So in an effort to not waste very valuable time with you today, we're just going to get right into this conversation with the very first question, which is, what makes you most proud to be part of agriculture and Western industries?
This question, I love it because no matter who you ask it, they are all going to have a different point of view. And that's kind of what leads into my answer is there's no one walk of life when it comes to Western or ag. There's so many different niches within the agricultural community, the Western community. And even growing up, I didn't understand that. I came from more of the rodeo side, the rodeo background. So thinking equestrian, people that rode equestrian, I never saw any of those kinds of events. So growing up and learning more about the Western industry as a whole, just really opened my eyes and made me love the industry even more. And so I just love how no matter what background you come from, it still brings people together and really unites us. And I feel like we all kind of have some of the similar roots and we're all fighting for some of the same great causes. And that's really something that I think is beautiful about the Western industry as a whole.
Well, and the reason that I ask you that question is I feel like that is kind of what your business and platform is really founded on, is bringing together all of these different people from various walks of life, regardless of what sector of the industry they come from, whether they have grown up in the industry, whether they have absolutely nothing to do with the industry other than they are fascinated by it and want to learn more. And the thing or things that you are able to connect people by, those threads, would be fashion and lifestyle and kind of those commonalities there, which is a really, really interesting thing.
Yeah, I really like to say I share obviously a lot about fashion, but I like to share like my point of view for a Western lifestyle. We live on a big ranch place, but my husband and I, we don't run cattle. He's a retired rodeo cowboy, but doesn't really do that anymore. He's kind of getting into team roping. I feel like they all come back around and start team roping. But we have horses. I have my goats that are just basically like my hobby farm animals, but we're still living in this rural lifestyle. And so that's what I think is really fun is that I get to kind of share these things from my point of view. Since my mom and my sister still rodeo professionally, I get to travel with them every once in a while and kind of show more of the behind the scenes of a rodeo from that standpoint, like watching them get their horses ready. And then kind of like sometimes I've been able to even go and help not necessarily warm their horses up, but like help take care of their horses when, they might have more than one or have to go do something. So it's been fun to be able to share like my point of view. And so I want that to serve mainly as like a platform where people can see, okay, no, she doesn't rodeo, she doesn't ranch, but sometimes she does go to brandings and helps out. And, there's just like so many ways you can still be involved, even if you're not directly, in that mix at that moment in your life.
Well, and I think too, for you especially, like fashion may be the vessel, like the thing that kind of brings people together. But through that, there is so much opportunity that you are able to, for lack of a better word, like educate and kind of help continue those conversations or pique people's interest because they came to you for fashion, but then they stayed for all of those other elements of agriculture or Western lifestyle, if you will, that they knew nothing about or that they were able to learn from you or see it from a different perspective than maybe somebody else that they follow online.
Yeah, one thing from 2024, my year of the word was expansion. And what that meant to me was kind of expanding the type of brands and clients that I was working with. So, what I really wanted to push myself was outside of the fashion realm, to be honest. So, I was wanting to work with maybe some more rodeo associations, or I even got to attend the Western Heritage Awards at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, their annual awards. And so even getting to incorporate, okay, help me pick some outfits, help me get dressed. But at the same time, I'm talking about what is this event? Who are they honoring? And, why it's important to our industry. So I've really had fun being able to expand that way and still showing the fashion side, but then trying to almost do like some education or some enlightening, if you will, about some of these more like niche areas of the industry.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the word enlighten because that is what you are here to do today, or kind of why I asked you to be a guest, because you have obviously built an identity as this incredibly successful content creator. And I want everybody to come into this episode with a very open mind because I think that there is so much that can be learned from a conversation like this. But in order to do that, I am going to very respectfully call out two groups of people. Again, maybe calling out is a harsh phrase, but there are these two different groups. And if you resonate with one of these, if you're a listener, here we go. Okay. So first up, there are a lot of people who hear the word influencer or content creator and they roll their eyes and think that you are just somebody who you like to take pictures and get paid for it. Joke's on them because that is one very small piece of what it is that you actually do. So can we kind of dig into that? Like people who maybe have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to the word influencer or content creator?
I think where that kind of stems from is there's such a low barrier of entry to become an influencer, to become a content creator. I mean, essentially, if you have a phone and you start a social media account, you can start posting like you're an influencer, even if you don't have an audience yet, and you just kind of keep going with it until you start to build that audience. And so that means that the doors are open for any and all kinds, which is a beautiful thing. But, it can also bring in some of the people that maybe don't have the best of intentions in mind, or they really, there are people out there that just want to get some of the free stuff. So I completely understand like that negative connotation where influencer comes from. But there are so many people that are out there really wanting to use their platform for good. I mean, we can see it even when some of these natural disasters happen, like the hurricanes on the East Coast, and then with the recent fires on the West Coast. You really see some of the people come together and like, how can we help these people? Or the fires that were in Texas last year. I know there was a whole bunch of people sharing about different foundations or ways that they can support some of these farmers that lost literally everything. And so I think it's important that if you're feeling that way about influencers or content creators, like maybe just need to redirect to find the right ones for you. Because I would love if everyone followed me, but I know I'm not for everyone, and that's a good thing. So I think you just need to like redirect where you're paying your attention to and find those people that are talking about the topics that matter or are sharing about things that might help you solve some problems in your life. Even for instance, I do Western fashion, but I'm not a mom yet. So I can't really relate to like maternity fashion or like on a busy mom schedule. And I know I get requests for that kind of stuff all the time. And I'm like, you guys, like, I want to relate to you, but like, that's just not the season of life I'm in. And so trying to recommend people that I know that are in that season or have been there and that can help them is also a thing. So never be afraid to reach out to people who are content creators and say, hey, I love what you do, but do you have someone that does more of this kind of thing? Or even asking that creator, like, could you talk about something like this? I love getting requests from my audience because ultimately I want to serve them. I kind of have like two clienteles, the businesses I work with, and I want to show them in the best light. But I also have my audience and my community, and those are the people I'm trying to help out at the end of the day.
Oh, there's so much good stuff out of that. The other thing that I think too that has really made you stand out is the business side, because I think when it comes to a lot of those people who maybe have that negative connotation with the word influencer or content creator, they have it in their mind, well, you get paid to post online. And a lot of the stuff that you are posting about, not you specifically, but any kind of influencer or content creator, right? Like, well, you're just selling stuff. You don't necessarily like it. You're just doing it to make a buck. And that is not true as well. Like, yes, you are a full-time content creator. You make the majority of your revenue from your life online. But there is so much work that goes into that. Like, it truly is a full-time job when it comes to scheduling things out and making great business deals. And I think that the business side of that often gets overlooked
Yeah.
because of all of the other stuff associated with it.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like in like 2016 to 2020, when like the influencer scene was really starting to kind of take off. I mean, I'll say that I said yes to some brand partnerships. We're looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, that's not something I use in my day to day life. But it was exciting at the time because I'm like, oh my gosh, this brand wants to work with me. But I feel like we've been able to grow and adjust in the industry where now like even smaller influencers don't need to say yes to brands that they don't genuinely love. And so I always cringe when I hear people say like, are you getting paid to say this? Because I'm like, at this point, I would hope that people know that I'm not just saying things to get paid. Like even if it's a brand that I've been working with for years, they're like, do you actually use this? I'm like, yes, I actually do drink Pendleton whiskey when I'm at a rodeo, you know? And so it can be a fine line, but I just feel like content creators and influencers have really embedded themselves within like general day-to-day life that hopefully you can really tell when people are using those products and genuinely love the products or brands that they're talking about. And if they're not, then again, redirect your focus. Like who can you connect with on a more authentic level? But I also think for so many content creators or aspiring content creators, is to really be mindful of which brand partnerships you are saying yes to. Not only for your sake, but you don't want to become known as one of those almost quote unquote sellout creators that will just push anything and everything in your face. The communities these days are way more aware of if they're being pushed an ad and they're not liking it anymore. And so if it doesn't feel authentic, if it's not something that you genuinely use within your life or at least give yourself time to try out products before you start advertising them, then I think that that should be some like red flags going off in terms of the business mind with it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and two, I mean, we all have to make money. Like there is no way around it. Unless you come from a trust fund, you have to have a job of some kind. So you would be sharing those same things online, whether or not you were getting paid, but you have been smart and focused on the business element. And because of that, and because you've worked so hard to really nurture and grow your audience and your community, you are now able to get paid for that. And I think it's just kind of like a mindset shift of how we look at things. But the reason that I bring that up is you have been wildly successful, and two things stick out into my mind as to why you've been able to create the success that you have. And that is because you focus on the business side of things and you are so consistent in your efforts. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who would and could be very, very talented, but they're not focused on the numbers. And because of that, then they are unable to make money. And like we established, you have to be able to make money in life. We have to have a job. And then they are not necessarily consistent in their efforts because it takes a lot of work to show up every single day, whether, the weather is crap outside and you can't get out to shoot content, or you're in a creative rut, or you've been sick, or, life happens and you have faced all of those various adversities. I know that your husband's father passed away and you were able to still do business through that. You have been sick. You have gone through creative ruts. You have really, truly weathered the storm in all of those different aspects. And I am just I admire you for that. But have you always known that those two things are what would or have created that success for you? Or what else do you think has helped you establish what you have been able to do so far?
Well, first of all, thank you, because I feel like even I forget that all the seasons of this that I've been through, because I've been a content creator for 8.5 years now, which is just insane to think about. But I think with those two things in mind, what I credit most is, a lot of people know this, but some people might. I used to be a tax accountant. And so I was working a 9 to 5, which more so was 80-hour work weeks during some months for 7 years of my life. And that was right alongside the same years that I was getting started in content creation and influencing. And so I think just having that more professional background, not even necessarily going through school and doing some formal education, but actually sitting in an office, working under my superiors and just learning how to be professional with clients, with my superiors, with my coworkers. I think that that has really helped me, on the business side of what I'm doing, because it is more than just showing up online. 9 times out of 10 during my work week, I'm sitting behind my desk and communicating with the brands I'm working with. I'm getting other little elements organized. And I feel like if you step away from that and you don't nurture that side of your business, then you really don't have a business, because you can post all the pretty pictures, do all the styling videos you want. But if you're not connecting with your clientele, which is the businesses, and being professional at it, then you're going to miss some of those steps. I think when I first got started, I didn't necessarily recognize that I don't want to say ahead of the game, but, kind of a step above and treating this like a business, because that was just second nature to me. I kind of just let my tax accountant side flow into the business side of, what I was doing. But I started getting commended by some of the brands I was working with. And I was like, are other people just not, professional in this way? But again, back to the low barrier to entry, especially with this being more of a younger demographic kind of field of work. A lot of these influencers or creators have never really worked a formal job, which is totally fine, but they've missed, some of those elements that it takes to run a business.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no offense to any 20-year-olds out there, because we were both once 20. You know nothing when you're in your 20s. What you think you know when it comes to business, you then know more when you're in your 30s. And I can say this at 34 years old, I know jack absolutely nothing about life compared to women who are in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And so you continually are learning as you go. But at the moment, you think you know everything, right? So I think that there's a lot to be said about that. And especially going back to you coming from that professional setting, do you feel like when you were first starting out and you had your 9 to 5 or your 80 hours a week during the tax season, and you still had to create content, were you more organized or dedicated then than you are now, because you have all of the time in theory to get it done?
Absolutely. And I hate to admit that, but I mean, I was more organized because I had to be. I only had maybe some evenings, obviously tax season. I didn't shut my business down, but I could only really work on part of the weekends, because I would still work throughout the weekends. And then I loved when summer rolled around because my hours were lower and like it was lighter later because the days were longer. But I just had to be more organized in a sense of I can't just on a random Tuesday go do a photo shoot. So if I wasn't, strategically mapping out my weeks and my months, then things just weren't getting done. But now that I'm my own boss and I'm like, yeah, I have all the time in the world. I can travel. If I want to go ride my horse on a nice day, I can do that. But it's come back to bite me in the ass sometimes because I'll get to the end of my work week and I'm like, what did I get done this week? I had this whole to-do list that wasn't necessarily overwhelming, but it was a very manageable list. And, now I feel like it's just rolling over into the next thing. So it's been tough.
Well, I'll tell you why I ask this because I'm definitely not calling you out. I feel the same way. In our busiest seasons, I am the most productive and I get the most crap done because I have no other choice. Like you just muscle your way through it. You figure out how you're going to get it done if you want it bad enough. And I think that that is such an important piece of information because how many of us have said this ourselves or we've heard our friends say it like, oh, I can't do that right now or I can't follow that dream because I'm too busy.
Yeah.
Bullshit. If you want it bad enough, too busy, like that is an excuse. You will figure out how to get it done.
Yeah. Again, I became my own boss, so I had no one really like watching over me or like assigning me these tasks that have to have a deadline. So I've actually been working with a business coach for 2.5, going on 3 years now. And she has like completely changed my business. Like, I don't think I could have ever established myself in these last like 2.5, 3 years without her. Just not necessarily even as like a motivator or a mentor, but just holding me accountable because even though I'm an Enneagram 3, I'm an achiever. I want to get things done. I kind of measure like everything in my life by how much I achieve. It still is like you can just kind of, I don't want to say get lazy, but you can just kind of get little lax with some things like, oh, I can do that tomorrow. Like I have some clothes or like some outfits hanging up here behind me that I'm like, okay, they're styled, but I haven't steamed them yet. And, like now it's cloudy today. So I miss like the best days of the week. So having a business coach and having her kind of like hold me accountable in those settings has been just like a level up for me within my own personal like entrepreneurship journey.
Oh, I love that. So that's actually a question that I was going to ask you. I'm glad you brought that up. I know that you've worked with a coach before and you've also been part of mastermind groups as well. I think that you did one with Julie Solomon, maybe. You have been dedicated to improving yourself and being a continued learner throughout all elements of this journey. Have you just always known, like, I want to keep learning? Or did you realize, like, oh no, I'm kind of behind the game, like, I've got to get back ahead? Or what have you learned from these experiences as a whole?
I think myself as a person, generally, I always want to learn more. I never want to be the smartest person in the room or the most successful person in the room. I'm always curious, even with my horsemanship stuff. Like, I'm sure my husband hates when I like have him go on rides with me because I'm like, okay, can you watch me do this? Like, am I doing this right? And just like even like little things in my life or in my business, like I just want to learn more. So I have taken numerous courses. I did that mastermind with Julie Solomon. And then having my business coach, she's more skilled in ways where I like tend to fail or just like don't know a whole lot. And so she helps me that way. But even when it comes down to the books or the podcasts that I listen to, I'm always like engaged with the more business minded ones. Or I've signed up for masterclass and I've challenged myself this year to listen to at least one masterclass a week across like all the different like topics. And so I'm always wanting just to like learn more business specific, but also in my personal life.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've had masterclass. However, Bob Iger, he ran Disney for a while. He has a masterclass course or had one, and it is epic. So I highly recommend that one. And if you're a listener and you have a masterclass, definitely go listen to that. It was really, really cool. Just like the creative process. And obviously somebody like that who is so busy, I really got a lot out of that for sure.
Yeah, I've been focusing a lot on like marketing and like sales types of strategies lately, just because that is still part of what I do. So I've been wanting to dive into some of those more. So again, with I have this whole stack of books, like new year, new me kind of mindset. I'm like, hey, what new business books do I need to read this year?
Well, let's talk about this because really, like, the ultimate flex is the fact that you have been able to create a full-fledged business through your work. You are fully self-employed and you're very transparent about the financial aspect of that. Recently, you posted, and you've done this now for 2 years in a row, about, how much you make via NFR. Because again, people think like, oh, Shaley's down there for, the better part of 2 weeks and she gets to get free outfits and drink free Pendleton whiskey. And no, that is not the case at all. Like, you have again set yourself apart because you focus on like the business side of things. But obviously at one time you were a full-fledged, full-time tax accountant. How long did it take you before you made the leap into content creating full-time? Because I know that you probably had this inkling of an idea, and it took a while to actually like hit send on the email or like hit act on the button, right? Did you crunch the numbers? Like, how did you know, okay, I'm ready to do this?
Yeah, so I started my first year as a tax professional was 2016, and that summer was actually the year I started West Desperado. So they went in hand, honestly, since the beginning, because West Desperado, the side of social media, was more of my creative outlet and my way to connect me back to the Western industry, because I was living in a city, working in the city, and I was going stir crazy because I was just really wanting to get back to my Western roots. So that's kind of where West Desperado came to light. I loved fashion, but specifically, I loved Western fashion. I loved going to the rodeos. So since those started around the same time, it was kind of all I knew for a long time. I did tax accounting for 7 years, and I worked for a few different firms within those 7 years. I tried out auditing for a little bit, and I kind of fell in love with tax, and I genuinely loved what I did. And I think that's what kept me in the field for longer than I realistically wanted to. I think it was after about my fifth tax season, I was like, I am kind of getting sick of this. It was around 2020. I had converted to working from home. So like the atmosphere just wasn't the same. I was working in my clawfist. So I was sitting there at a desk, but then behind me was all these racks of boots and shoes. And I'm like, I just want to go play dress up right now. And so that was kind of when the wheels started turning. I'm like, okay, when can I realistically, make this switch? Like, is it feasible? Is this actually a reliable career? Because I was making decent money, and it necessarily wasn't about the money, but I mean, everything bottom line kind of is. Like, I was still paying off my student debt. My husband kind of mentioned, he's like, I think you should pay off this before you like quit, like end it. And I'm like, that's like a reasonable argument. But I'm like, I really genuinely feel like I can make more if I quit and commit to being able to like travel with some of these brands and get paid more to do some of this stuff. So I did have to sit down and kind of crunch the numbers. Like, what were my monthly bills? Like, how much was I needing to, at least stay a little bit ahead? If not, I wanted to stay ahead of than just breaking even, because I wanted to be successful at what I was doing. Again, I'm an achiever, so I want to be good at what I'm doing. So that was within my 5th years when I kind of started playing around with those ideas. And then right before my 7th tax season, I was at the NFR, and my friend Anna was there helping me. It was the first year that she had helped me. I remember it clear as day. We were at the Mirage watching Casey Donahue, just having the greatest time. And she turns to me and is like, your accounting firm can replace you overnight. Nobody else can be West Desperado. And I was just like, my brain like shot out of my ears. I was like, you are so right. Again, it was probably like a little bit of encouragement, like fueled by Pendleton whiskey at that point in the evening too. But I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I go home in like, I don't know, it was like 5 days. Like, we were halfway through the NFR. And I was like, okay, I'm going to book a meeting with my boss, and I'm just going to tell her, like, I'm going to put my 2 weeks in, which would have been right around like New Year's, which is also right before the heat of tax season. So terrible time to leave an accounting firm hanging. I was like, but I'm going to do it. And so NFR wraps up. I booked that call with my boss, and I kind of tell her like what I'm thinking. And I wasn't hiding my influencing from my accounting firm, but I wasn't like, hey, yeah, I also like, this is what I'm doing over here on the side, and I'm kind of making money at it. But I know that a few of my coworkers had like knew about it, but I didn't know if my boss did. And I kind of told her like, so I've actually been doing this thing, separately on the side. And I just think that that's more of my calling. And she's like, well, if I'm being honest, if you don't want to burn a bridge, like, we'd love to keep you on for tax season. Like, we can lessen your hours. Like we'll still work with you, but we'd love to like keep you on our team to help us get through this season because it's a little too late to hire someone new. And I was like, okay, I agree with that. Again, I loved the people I worked with. I loved my job. So I stayed on that one last tax season and I was still working from home. That was 2022. Finally, the office opened on tax day and we all got to come back together. And on that day, I like handed them my laptop and I was like, thank you guys so much. Like, this is so weird. And I like walked out of that building onto the streets of Portland, Oregon. And I was just like, this like sense of relief that I was just like, this is so strange. I'm like, now what? Like, okay, I made that shift, but I'm like, now, like, it really is all in my hands at this point.
Oh, well, and it is so cool because I really have been around since like every iteration of Shaley Ham and West Desperado. I remember when you first started your account and it was basically like an inspo account. You shared other people's content. You
Yeah.
didn't even create your own content. Like, so what you started with is completely different than what it is now. I
Yeah.
remember then when you lived in Portland in a camper
Yeah.
because you had to work in the office and then you'd go home to Washington on the weekends so that you could be around Nick and all your animals. So I've seen you weather the storm. And I think that again, just like your continued drive and determination is so admirable. But the other thing that you mentioned is Anna. So last week, Lexi Hoagland mentioned that we were talking about Cowgirls and Cocktails and how she was able to host a tea party at the Virgin during the 2024 NFR back in December. And how you and Anna were the two people who really set that up for her, basically telling the Virgin, like, hey, you guys need to host this type of an event. It's not in our wheelhouse. We know the perfect person to do this, and it is Lexi. And I know you and Anna both personally and professionally, and you guys, like, you are girls. You are the biggest supporters of one another, but you really surround yourself with great people. But as part of that, you are also like the greatest cheerleader for other people.
Yeah, I really have come to view myself as a connector. I love to see some people's strengths and like, okay, they can help this other person I know over here. And in the back of my mind, everyone wants to be mentioned in rooms they're not in. And so I really wanted to also be that person for other people. I can't expect people to say my name in rooms I'm not in if I'm not genuinely doing the same. And so I've kind of realized over the years that I am a connector. I want to help people out. Like, even if it has nothing else to do with me, the Virgin situation with Lexi and Cowgirls and Cocktails, that happened so naturally and organically because the Virgin had just kind of mentioned in a conversation, like, yeah, we want to bring more, events towards the Virgin during the National Finals Rodeo. And then, a couple weeks later, I was in Texas at the Cowgirl Gathering and I was there as a speaker, and so was Lexi. And I was going back to the Virgin and I knew I was going to kind of have an NFR meeting with them. So after the Cowgirl Gathering, I pulled Lexi aside. I was like, have you ever thought of hosting one of your events like during the NFR? And she's like, yes, I think that'd be so much fun. And I was like, okay, I'm going to the Virgin and I'm just going to like throw your name in the mix. I think it would fit so naturally. Like, they have the space. You'd be able to bring all those people together. And it was just so fun to be able to like help her out, like, I don't know if you call it a program, like her Cowgirls and Cocktails out. I love her message behind the whole reason why she started that. And so it's just been fun to be able to connect the different people within the industry and just help them grow, I guess.
Well, you always have been such an encourager to me and to so many others in the industry. And I think that is one of the reasons that you have been as successful as you are. Let's get to the rapid fire round because we're going to wrap this up. But first question, what is the best piece of business or personal advice that you've ever been given?
It would have to be a quote always comes onto my mind when people ask me my best advice that I've been given. And I believe it was Sherry Serby. It was an interview that she was doing. Sherry Serby said, you have to be comfortable and know how to lose before you can ever win. And that, like, I think it was like a TikTok interview I saw. And I was like, that hit me like a ton of bricks because I was also a former athlete, but taking that from like an athlete barrel racer perspective to then being like, that is so right. Like, you have to hear a no and you have to lose before you can like really win because you have to take those failures and turn them into successes.
Oh, amen to that. Okay, we're going to turn the tables a little bit. That's the best advice you have been given. Now it's your turn to give some advice. So if you could give people any words of wisdom and you knew that they would take it to heart, what would it be?
I would have to say is always be authentically you and don't try to be what people want you to be.
Yes, that is super important. Especially, I feel like there are a lot of iterations of a
Mhm.
person too. And I feel like you kind of have that figured out. And then you kind of change who you are and then kind of get lost again. And it is a constant journey of ebbs and flows in that.
Yes, exactly.
If you could go to dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Okay. I feel like this one, I don't know, the name that's standing out right now, I feel like this is one that will change depending on what season I'm in, but right now I almost wanna say Lainey Wilson, not just because she's cool, not because she's fashionable, but, like, if you see her in concert and she actually has almost like her little, moments of speeches and she brings the little girls on stage, like, I get emotional every time I've seen her in concert or I've seen clips of it. I just think that she has, some of those, like, very grounded in your roots is what I would say she is.
Oh, I love that. This morning, I had a little girl that I took to daycare, and she had on a Wrangler Lainey Wilson t-shirt. We had to listen to Wildflowers, Wild Horses on the way into town. She loves Yaney Wilson. That's what she calls her. I want Yaney Wilson. And oh, she really is just such an inspiration for so many little girls out there. And I think that you are too. But okay, couple more questions and then I'll let you go. What is a quote that you lead your life by?
I would have to say strive to be worth knowing, not to be well known.
That is super important. And last one, I know you're going to have some good ones on this one too. Let's talk about favorite things. Do you have a favorite, like a product, service, book, podcast, anything that has changed your life in some way and you just want to shout it from the rooftops and more people need to know about it?
I mentioned previously I'm big into like the business books and podcasts, and I think one that everyone should read no matter what they're really doing within their lives is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That book was written in 1936 and it can be kind of dry at times, but it just factors into so many different things that, I'm naturally an introvert actually. And so I'm like, okay, I need to step out and kind of branch out and do this. And so he has so much wisdom within that book.
Oh, okay. Well, I will make sure for those of you who are listening and you want to read that we will link it in the show notes. Shaley, I'm sure everybody's already following you online, but if somebody by chance isn't, where can they find you?
I am on all platforms as West Desperado. So if you just go ahead and search that, you can find me pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Guys, do us a favor. If you had a favorite piece of advice or takeaway or something you related to that Shaley said, share it in your stories. Make sure to tag us. That always is such a win for us when we see those. You guys really are the best listeners, and I'm not just saying that to you, but thank you. You guys know you can catch us back here next week with a brand new episode of Leaders of the West. Until then, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back here soon.
If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.